Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
I'm with Nitin Gokhale, Editor-in-Chief of StratNews Global, and Ananth, Krishnan, the China Correspondent of The Hindu newspaper. Based in Chennai, though, he's waiting for a visa to get back into Beijing. Gentlemen, welcome to the Print Debates.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, both of you are perhaps amongst the best informed journalists on the evolving China story. Nitin, you've just come back from Leh. Tell us what you saw and what's the latest that's happening on this disengagement between Chinese and Indian troops in Ladakh.
Well, this time, unlike my trip, a 10-day trip in October, I didn't see anything physically, Jyoti. But certainly I had long discussions with people who are in the know, who are decision makers in Northern Command and of course in the national security establishment. And I got a full sense of what's happening in terms of disengagement. The disengagement at the Pengang So Lake, both on the southern bank and the northern bank, should end on Wednesday evening. And the last phase included withdrawing from Richinla and Rizangla Heights and then verifying everything. Those steps have been all detailed, so I don't want to go into that. But what I saw was high confidence of the military leadership there in achieving what they have achieved, which was not very easy. It was done over 9 rounds, as you know, and they are now looking forward to the 10th round, 48 hours after the withdrawal is complete. The first phase is complete. So I think enormous amount of energy and time has gone into this to achieve what looked impossible even in December or early January.
Ananth, you edit or write, create perhaps an eminently readable China newsletter on a daily basis. What is your view on this ongoing disengagement between Indian and Chinese troops? It's been several months in the making. It's been 9 months since the face-off began last April. Your first comments.
Right. Just to take off from what Nitin said, the thing that really struck me when I first saw the statement from the PLA on February 10th, and then it was confirmed by Rajnath Singh in Parliament the next day, just a few months ago, quite frankly, I don't think there were any observers who thought that China would vacate the north bank of Pangong Lake. At least I didn't see many people making that argument.
Why not? Why not?
I think just in terms of the fact that they had come in with so many people, the fact that they had created infrastructure there in the disputed area between Finger 4 and Finger 8, my sense was generally the views that I read amongst most people who follow China was that Xi Jinping's China would not vacate. So that was my first reaction. I was genuinely surprised that they had agreed to do that, and the speed with which they did that was quite something. Can
I interrupt you if you don't mind?
Yeah.
Now you read Chinese yourself. You speak Chinese. You read Chinese. The fact that the Chinese Foreign Ministry and the Chinese Defense Ministry spokespersons were the first ones to talk about this disengagement, is that interesting for you?
No, I did think it is interesting that they both released statements on Wednesday evening on the eve of the Chinese New Year holiday, since China goes into complete shutdown on 7 days. So it's probably one reason why they put it out on Wednesday and didn't wait for Thursday. If you know how seriously they take that holiday in China, and could also explain why they retreated so quickly. But I think that it is significant that they both made that statement. Though, of course, they did make a statement in July as well that there was going to be phased disengagement. So that's worth keeping in the back of our minds. And I think the statements are one thing. What they're doing on the ground, and we've seen visuals coming out yesterday, I think that's worth 1,000 words. That's worth more than any statements that Beijing might say. But Jyoti, my own reaction, if I can just quickly finish that point, was that the way I see it, just looking at the fact that they've created this no patrolling zone, I think in an area, in my view, where both sides have made equal concessions, in my view. Mm-hmm. And also in my view, it could perhaps be argued that they had it was a harder ask for China because they had to vacate infrastructure as well, which India doesn't have to that same degree. So, so for me, I think the arrangement is a reasonable one for as far as I see it. I think the big question that I'm sure you'll want to debate is the question of leverage in the South Bank, which we can discuss. But just looking at this area and the arrangement of the North Bank, as I see it, is the most reasonable one that you could expect at this moment in time.
Okay. Nitin, you wanted to come in here.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make a point about the announcement in China. It was supposed to be a simultaneous announcement in New Delhi and in Beijing.
Okay.
But since India's parliament was on, and that day I think the Prime Minister's reply to the motion of thanks was delayed. Therefore, Rajnath Singh couldn't make that statement on Wednesday evening. And therefore, it was delayed from Indian side. But the Chinese went ahead nevertheless, as Ananth said, because the New Year was going to be, the holidays were going to begin. And any case, they made the announcement after nearly 100 tanks of theirs had withdrawn from and had gone back to a place called Shandong, which is about 70 kilometers from Moldo near Chushul. So the process had already begun. By the time Rajnath Singh made the statement on Thursday, the process was well underway, and I think both sides have stuck to the written agreements that were arrived upon.
Okay, so both of you know, you've both been covering China for a substantial length of time. Both of you know that this is very, very closely coordinated, that governments coordinate these things very, very closely. So the fact, whatever it is, whether it was the Chinese, the Spring Festival holiday, the fact that they did go ahead, despite the fact that Rajnath Singh was delayed in making the statement on the floor of the House. Nitin, what does that indicate to you? Why this keenness?
Well, this keenness was apparently very clear since December, from what one knows from the discussions that took place in these corps commanders meetings. The Chinese were increasingly telling the Indian interlocutors that let's get over with this. But they were trying to put some conditions which India did not agree to and stuck to its position.
But why? Why get over this? After all, they are the ones who aggressed in April. What happened in December?
I'll tell you why. They did not. They realized that they were not achieving what they set out to achieve.
Which is what?
Which is that military coercion would force India to ask for concessions or ask for talks or discussions and accept what they had done or tried to do. They were surprised by India's speed of India's response as well as its scale. As we speak, there are nearly 90,000 Indian troops. They are not additional troops. Nearly 60,000 were pumped in, additional troops were pumped in since end of May, and which they didn't realize that India had come to that position over a decade or so of preparation, of logistics, of infrastructure, of preparation, and they were enormously surprised. Now, they didn't achieve what they wanted. They thought they will walk in and just stay there, and India will then ask for negotiations or talks. Since it was going nowhere, India was not budging. And then this surprise, the brigade level operations that they did on the South Bank and on Richinla and Rizangla and over and above the Finger 4 and Finger 2 and 3 in end of August was, the Chinese were really taken by surprise. They knew that this is a military stalemate going nowhere, and therefore they wanted the stalemate to end as soon as possible. India made it very clear, we'll stay as long as it takes.
Right.
So which was not in their favor, not in their interest, because they wanted this to end swiftly.
Mm-hmm. Ananth, Nitin is talking about a military stalemate, that the Indians surprised the Chinese by taking the Kailash range, not taking them, sorry, that's the wrong word, by climbing the heights of the Kailash range, because this is on India's side of the line of actual control. But the question to you is, what did the Chinese want to achieve in April, which, now they are disengaging from?
A good question that I ask myself every day, but I'd be lying to you, Jyoti, if I said I could give you a black and white answer as to, frankly, I don't know. Frankly, most people that I've spoken to in the government of India don't know either. And in all the rounds of talks that they've had, from my own understanding, I think even Delhi doesn't have a very, very, very clear picture as to what prompted them to kind of revisit, disregard all these really carefully created protocols that have been in place for so many years and helped keep the peace. So the fact that it was a big decision that they made to question those border agreements and in many ways take the relationship back. And I, frankly, sitting here in India as well, have no credible answer as to why they did it. All I can make are educated guesses from what they've said in the Chinese press and the Chinese media. Mm-hmm. And to me, the most plausible explanation would be, again, this is just a hunch, rather than tied to bigger strategic messaging. To me, a lot of it is related to the line of actual control, to what Nitin said, perhaps China trying to flex its muscles and get an advantageous position in response to whatever infrastructure India has been building. Perhaps for whatever reason, they've thought that April 2020, when the pandemic was just taking off in India, might have been a good time for them to try it and to do it. So that's an educated guess that I would make. It's something about trying to establish their superiority in areas that they find crucial along the LAC. And as Nitin said, it did not work out, or hasn't worked out so far for them in the way that they imagined. That would be my best guess, Jyoti. But again, I would also put a big asterisk at the end of what I said, that I think it's very difficult to say with certainty what their motivations were, what their calculations were, why they went in and why they came out.
What do you think, Nitin? What did they want to achieve in the first place?
Well, as Ananth said, and I think even EAM Jaishankar has said that we are still looking for answers of why they did this. But if we go back a little in the history of Indian political dispensation since 1989, or let's say even 1993, when all these agreements were signed, Chinese were used to dealing with coalition, relatively weak governments in Delhi. They had a handle on how governments in India would react in such situations. But come 2014, when you got a first majority government in 30 years, they thought, well, it's a freakish kind of occurrence. And they did not sort of look at it as seriously as they should have. Their scholarship about India had fallen way behind their scholarship on the Americans or the Japanese. And therefore, they were taken by surprise with, I think, Modi being elected as the Prime Minister of a majority government. Yet, Doklam happened. Again, they were a little surprised. They didn't take lessons from there. In 2019, when the majority government came back, then they realized that this is now going to be difficult to deal with India, which is relatively more assertive, more resolute. And therefore, they wanted to humiliate Modi and cut him down to size like they did Jawaharlal Nehru in 1962 is one of the reasons I would think, again, my personal opinion. And that's why they did this at a time when COVID was keeping everybody preoccupied. Indian economy was in a bad shape. The world was going through a flux because of Americans being distracted with Trump and the elections. So they thought this is the best time to do it. But they had not realized that India had changed both militarily and in political decision-making or national security decision-making. That's my guess.
So I'm going to come back to you, Nitin, to ask you about how the Indian strategy unfolded. But Ananth, the question to you is, this is the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Chinese Communist Party, which they're going to celebrate later this year, sometime in July. Now, Xi Jinping, or the great leader as he is known, or the dear leader, does this happen with his say-so? He is the president of the Central Military Commission and all of that. Or could this decision have been taken to disengage? And they've come back so quickly, like you guys are saying. They've withdrawn all the infrastructure from the Pangong Sol Lake. The tanks have moved out completely. Could this decision to come back in such a hurry, I would actually even call it an unseemly hurry, would it have been taken without Xi Jinping's say-so?
I don't think so. I think that given the fact that from all that we gather, he's been fairly hands-on in terms of as a leader of the PLA, unlike his predecessor was. So I think that even if it's highly unlikely the way the system works in China that he would get into the nitty-gritty in terms of the details. But I'm pretty sure that in terms of broad contours of what China would do, broad contours of what would be acceptable to them, what the red lines would be for their negotiators. I think, of course, that would come from the Central Military Commission. There's no doubt about that. And there has been evidence to suggest that in the South China Sea, he's been fairly hands-on and involved. So there's no reason to think that he would be completely hands-off when it comes to India. So I would say that with a high degree of certainty that the broad lines of what the PLA would find acceptable, what their red lines were when negotiating with India, and also what their endpoint was. In this case, it was to disengage. I would say that would certainly have come from the top. One quick point that I wanted to add to what Nitin said in terms of trying to understand the reasons. I did mention that my hunch was it was tied very much to the border and establishing superiority over the border. But the other important point to my eyes is that there's been a change in how they've been handling disputes across the board, not just vis-a-vis India, but with other neighbors, other maritime disputes as well. And I think the former NSA Shashank Menon made this great point recently where from recognizing disputes that were mutually recognized, as in the case of India, they're now claiming all these entire areas as not being disputed, but as being areas that China has sovereignty on. So they're narrowing the window, they're narrowing the space that they had to discuss these disputes with countries diplomatically. And they seem to perhaps think for whatever reason that given their current stature or given their current military power, they feel that they can assert themselves and settle these disputes without firing a shot. And I think that's something that we've seen across the board that's worth keeping in mind as well.
Okay. So Nitin, explain to us what happened. In April, the Chinese come in quietly. They, they aggress or there is an incursion across the line of actual control. What happens after that? Was it, in your mind, was it an intelligence failure? How did the Indians respond?
No, see, you have to look at the infrastructure on the Chinese side and also the capabilities that we have in keeping what is called the ISR, the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance capabilities. So the Chinese, as I mentioned, their tanks went back in about 16, 17 hours, about 110 kilometers to Rudong County. There's a big base there when they went back. Mm-hmm. So Chinese normally in the spring months, they do an exercise in the areas near Aksai Chin, in Aksai Chin, in fact, and they've been doing this for years together. But because India's tactical intelligence, while Indian satellites have the capability of detecting the Chinese movements and Chinese exercises, India's tactical reconnaissance and intelligence capabilities along the LAC, which was lacking, I would say, at that point in time. When the Chinese moved within 10 hours from that exercise and turned towards the LAC, India was certainly surprised. I won't call it a intelligence failure. It was a question of how much resources one had in Ladakh. Let me give you an example, for instance. In 2010, I toured Eastern Ladakh for 10 days in the month of January at the height of winters. That time there used to be 2 battalions, 2,000 troops manning the entire Eastern Ladakh. Mm-hmm. Today, there are 90,000 people. So, the capability of the Indians have increased.
But 90,000 soldiers right now, or were they sent after the aggression?
After the incursions, 60,000 troops were pumped in, but 30,000 were there. So from 2,000 to 30,000 in 10 years, India had already started looking at Eastern Ladakh. But the intelligence capabilities, the reconnaissance capabilities had not kept pace. So that's certainly a setback. But after May 5th, when it was discovered, and there's a story to that discovery which can be told maybe later.
Why don't you tell us now?
No, not now.
Tell us a small cover of the story. Come on now.
Say it on my channel first, and then you can.
Okay, we can. I'll hold it. So, but you can tell us now. Come.
No. It's not a story really, but they discovered it accidentally. Let me say it like this. It was an accident that they discovered that Chinese are doing something there which is not normal. And
was it like a bit like Kargil when the shepherds first?
It was not shepherds. It was somebody in the Indian Army and the Air Force and in the intelligence setup. They discovered it accidentally. Now, there's a story behind that which can be told later, not now. But the fact is, it was an accidental discovery of their ingress or their attempt to ingress at Galwan, for instance, or at Hot Spring. Not Pangangso or not the Moldo, Chushul area. But nevertheless, so from May 5th onwards, when this discovery was made, within about 10 days, India moved a huge number of troops and got them sort of what they call mirror deployment done. Now this in olden days or even 5 years ago would not have been possible, and the Chinese, I don't think, kept pace in keeping the Indian capability development on their radar. They didn't realize that India can do this, and it was done. Galwan was a turning point. See, Galwan happened because some terms of the agreement were not followed, and therefore this was something that even like this disengagement, that time also it was declared that it's going to be a disengagement at Galwan and at Hot Spring.
You're talking about the fracas between the Indian and Chinese soldiers, in which 20 Indian soldiers were killed on the 15th of June.
Yeah, killing of the soldiers happened first time after 1975.
Right.
But that was a script that went horribly wrong. Both sides miscalculated the intention of the other, and that happened. And since then, you know the story, how again additional troops were brought in, then the negotiations went on, and the negotiations were going nowhere. The Chinese tried to bully India, saying, accept this, accept that. India said, we're not going to do, you do whatever you want, we'll stay through the winter. They were forced to stay through the winter. I don't think the Chinese calculated their stay to be this long. They thought this will get over before the winter is over by altering the status of the LAC, and which India actually prevented the unilateral alteration of the LAC in this entire episode. And that's what there is to it, not the larger solution to the LAC really.
So Ananth, when you look at this, the big picture now, we will see the next steps. Of course, it's a trust and verify kind of disengagement. But, you've covered this story for so long. The Chinese have refused to even exchange maps on the western sector as well as on the eastern, whether it's in Ladakh or in Arunachal Pradesh. I think in the middle sector, there has been some exchange. How do you look at this? Do you think that this is perhaps the first shot? I mean, excuse the word, but that both India and China are perhaps looking at, in the future, a settlement of this prolonged boundary question?
Well, one can only hope, Jyoti, but I would say that it's not even a trust and verify. I think it's verify and verify, because there's zero trust at this point, and I think that we should forget about that. But I think that one thing worth considering is, I've seen even in the aftermath of all that's happened, and as you said rightly, we're in the middle of this process, maybe even in the beginning of this process, though it's going faster than what many people expected. Nitin just said today that it's going quite quickly. I first heard on February 11th that they were expecting 2 to 3 weeks. So it actually seems to be going faster than that.
So that's the question. I don't understand this. Why?
But I still think that, Jyoti, one thing that we should really reconsider is, I've seen a lot of people keep reiterating this expectation on India's side that to clarify the LAC. For me, my reading from last year's crisis is that ship has sailed. I don't think that China ever wants to clarify the line of actual control. I think that all
even
along...
Even after this, do you know?
I think all along they've been saying that rather than clarify it, that both sides should just settle it, and which is what they've been saying. And I think that I don't think they want a settlement either, for various reasons, which is that I think there's a dominant view in Beijing that having an unsettled boundary is something that they see as leverage, that they feel that settling the boundary would be giving away something which they can't hold India to. And obviously the biggest concern that overrides everything else is China-US relations. And I think they look at India often in the prism of looking at China-US relations. And I think that their thinking is slightly hard to understand, where on the one hand, they feel that settling this boundary would be giving away this leverage that they have. But then on the other hand, it's a kind of like the strange irony, which I write about in my book as well, where it kind of reinforces this insecurity dynamic between the two. So one Chinese scholar put it in a very interesting way that has always stayed with me, where he says that, you people in India, you look at the boundary resolution as the means to a better relationship. But in China, they look at it as the consequence of an improved relationship, to which my immediate question is, the relationship will not be significantly improved unless you settle the boundary. So you're caught in this terrible dynamic. And I think that unless that calculus changes in Beijing, I don't expect to see that any movement towards a clarified line of actual control. We've been flagging this dead horse for 18 years now, or 19 years now, since the last map was exchanged. So I don't think they would, our expectation probably should be changed in terms of clarifying the LAC, and I think the conversation should now be, how do you manage these areas where the LAC overlaps? Are we in a completely new terrain now where these overlapping LAC areas are going to be active, and how do we manage that going forward should probably be the thinking right now.
Right. And Nitin, explain to us about the Indian Army deciding to come down from the Kailash Heights, which is on the southern banks of the Pangong. So there's been a lot of talk about the fact that India is giving away the only leverage it has.
Well, that leverage, Jyoti, to my mind, was limited to getting what India wanted on the north bank of Pangangso. And having got...
Which is that you said that the Chinese have agreed to go back to the Sirija post, which is behind Finger 3, right?
Finger 8.
Finger 8,
so,
right.
And why beyond Finger 8, east of Finger 8 at Sirija. Now remember this, India's LAC claim is running through Finger 8, which means India retains that claim, and Chinese claim is on Finger 4. The LAC runs through Finger 4. And by temporarily halting the patrolling rights on both sides, what India has gained is that since India did not have this road to go to from Finger 3 to 4 and then beyond to Finger 8, India was going there once in maybe 2 months over the last 15 years or so. And each time, because of the better infrastructure on the Chinese side, each time Indian foot patrols entered Finger 4, the Chinese would come from Finger 8 quickly on their vehicles and give a face-off at Finger 5 or Finger 6. So they always had this advantage. But that right or that frequency with which they used to come has now been halted. India has also never accepted the Chinese 1959 claim line. So the limited point of the Kailash range maneuver, as I call it, was to get what India wanted on the North Bank. That North Bank was the crux of the matter. Now, you might ask, and a lot of people have asked this question, they've turned around and said, oh, what if they come and occupy the Kailash range? Well, if India could climb up and outrace them on 29th and 30th of August, I see no reason why if the Chinese start moving from Moldo and they want to come and occupy there, why India cannot outrace them again. Those precautions have been put in place, and there's a written agreement. If they don't adhere by the
there is a written agreement.
There is a written agreement. This time, one of the change dynamics of the India-China resolution to this disengagement or the road to disengagement is that this is a written agreement. All the points have been agreed upon in writing, which the Chinese have done. Even the disengagement process, each step, there has been a signing of the step that this has been verified, this structure has been demolished, this road has been leveled as it was in April 2020. That kind of thing has happened because as someone said, "Doodh ka jala hua chhach bhi fook ke peeta hai." In Hindi, they say that. Once eaten, twice shy, kind of a thing. So India put all that in mind. I think this is overblown, this Kailash range advantage, because after first 6 days or so, even the Chinese came to Kailash range. Richingla, Rizangla, you saw the tanks just 150 feet apart from each other. So there was no real advantage beyond just staying there face to face. And therefore, India did not want to use this leverage to clarify the LAC or resolve the LAC in the entire length of the 832 kilometers of the Eastern Ladakh LAC. That should be kept in mind.
So tell me something. In the two delegations, in the Indian delegation, of course, you have a representative of the Ministry of External Affairs, which is Naveen Srivastav. Do the Chinese also have a political commissar type of person?
From the 8th round onwards, they did start. They were informed, and they also kept sending somebody from there. And this also worked very well, from what I know. That the whole of government approach. The Chinese were also aware that it's not only the military which is negotiating, it's the government of India that is negotiating in this case. And therefore, there was enormous respect for that stand that India had taken. And therefore, they were also forced to send in MOFA representative, which is, as Ananth would agree, is low down the pecking order in Beijing under the CMC. But they were forced to bring in a foreign service Ocean Affairs and Border Affairs DG, I think, for this negotiations.
Anand, just hold your thoughts for a second. A quick follow-up, Nitin, what happens in the next steps? Depsang Plains, where there is, the Chinese have come in substantially across into the Indian side of the line of actual control. The Y junction, where it is now being said that Indians are not being allowed to patrol, which they were before this time.
Okay, so as I said, 48 hours after this de-escalation is completed, or the disengagement is complete, they're going to meet. Now, Depsang, I just want to take a minute. There's an enormous misconception about Depsang. The Chinese so-called 1959 claim line. The Chinese 1959 claim line was done by Chou En-lai, the then premier, on a small-scale map. He had 3 points which were joined. The line was straight drawn and said, okay, this is our claim line, which he declared in 1960 or made public.
Right.
Now, Depsang is, according to that claim line, their line of perception or line of LAC perception is up to a village called Burtse, which is 10 kilometers southwest of the Y junction. They are supposed to come up to that that point, Butse village in the Indian side. While India is not allowed to go to the limits of patrolling, which are those patrolling points beyond the Y junction, which is India's perception of the LAC, even the Chinese are not able to come from the Y junction to Butse, according to their own claim lines. So there's a face-off. And this face-off is almost 21 years old. It started in 19 years old. 2002, the Depsang problem started. So India did not want to link the Depsang issue with this because that is an ongoing and a regular issue which can be resolved by the local commanders, is what India's sense is. Whether the Chinese will agree or not, we'll see. Other points are very small points, about 50 troops on each side, Gogra and Hot Springs. Even that will be discussed by the Corps commander. But let us not forget that this is only disengagement. This is not de-escalation. They've gone back only 100 kilometers, 150 kilometers. They've not gone back to their permanent peacetime locations. And they're capable of coming as quickly as they went back. So nobody in the security establishment is complicit about this. They're saying the next step after the talks 48 hours later should be about de-escalation and de-induction of those forces back into Tibet or back to from wherever they came. That remains to be done. That's a work in progress. Whether that will happen or not, we don't know. And nobody is lowering their guard, as far as I know, in these places, because now India has got the capability there. Let's be sure about this, that if next time the Chinese move, India will get to know at least 4-5 hours in advance.
Right. Now, another question to you is, in an earlier comment, Nitin said that the Chinese realized, especially after 2019, when Prime Minister Modi comes back as Prime Minister, that this is a changed story in Delhi. The scenario's changed and the Chinese wanted to humiliate Prime Minister Modi. What do you think about that?
I frankly have no way of knowing, Jyoti, as I like to keep repeating, what their motivations were. My hunch would be that I frankly don't know, but if I had to make a plausible guess, I would say that it's unlikely to be driven just by, say, whatever they may or may not think about Prime Minister Modi. I think it's probably more a reflection of how they've been handling other unresolved areas, the fact that they've been more assertive in all other disputes. The point that I made earlier that they're now no longer mutually recognized disputes and just saying it's their way and everyone should abide by their claim lines everywhere. I think we should pay attention to the kind of
this confidence. I mean, I don't understand this. Even the Americans at the height of their superpower, is that they don't walk into other countries like this, do they?
No, but then again, you should also keep in mind how they've been portraying the events within China, right? Whether or not we agree with what they say, the way the Chinese state media has been covering the line of actual control crisis right from June was when they began covering it. In April and May, there was complete silence. But it's very interesting to pay attention to how they've covered it, which is exact mirror imaging of how we have covered it. Their entire narrative so far, which people in China believe, since I get questions about this, their entire narrative in China so far is that in the summer, while China was down and out because of COVID-19, India tried to mobilize and nibble territory and they responded. So this is what people in China believe. This is what the state media in China are reporting. So it's complete mirror imaging and the opposite of what we are reading here. So, and I think that I often also get asked the question, how will they portray this back home when Xi Jinping has been framed as this strong leader? And now that these images, which I'm sure will be come to social media, showing them on this long march back to their posts. But I think it's, I wouldn't underestimate the ability to spin this as well. Just like I think they spun
How would they do that?
Right, just like how they spun Doklam as well, where most people in China believe, barring I think a few voices on Weibo and social media, that Doklam was about China preventing India from coming in. And finally, when India withdrew, they framed that as a win. And because of the fact that unlike India, it's not a democracy, there's no free press, the fact that the Communist Party of China controls the flow of information. Unlike here, where we are discussing finger 3 and finger 4 in the Kailash range, there are zero details being discussed publicly in China. No one has even any inkling of the minutiae, and that's intended because they want to keep it ambiguous and vague. So it's easy for them to sort of massage the narrative and massage the information. And I think they would be able to do that. And
you think they can actually do that? I mean, this whole withdrawal is taking place. And they can, how do they manage? Even my favorite Chinese journalist, who should be enough, the Global Times, I mean, I hope you're listening, Mr. Hu, but there's been nothing at all in Global Times. It's just been a very, very...
It's interesting how Hu Xijin has been spinning this, because the way Hu Xijin Global Times has been spinning this is to say that the fact that they could withdraw so quickly shows that they can mobilize so quickly. So that's the spin. But anyway, I don't think we in India should be frankly bothered by how they're spinning this at home. The way I see it, if both are able to have a face-saving way to explain it, and if both are able to ensure that there's some amount of disengagement, as Nitin said, we aren't de-escalated yet. I don't think we should be particularly too bothered how they are spinning it within China.
Right. Gentlemen, thank you both. This has been a fascinating discussion. Thank you for participating in the print debates. And I will personally be following you both and reading and hearing and seeing what you're saying on this evolving China story. Thank you again, Ananth Krishnan of The Hindu and Nitin Gokhale of StratNews Global. Thanks again.
Pleasure.
Thank you.